to the US now, where President Joe Biden has insisted once again that he does intend to stay in the presidential race despite concerns about his mental capacity. He's now received some unexpected support from Germany's Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, who says he's not worried about the American president's mental ability. Some members of Biden's Democratic Party, however, have asked him to step aside after a disastrous debate performance against Donald Trump last month.
A defiant President Biden on the campaign trail.
I've been doing this a long time, and I, honest to God, have never been more optimistic about America's future if we stick together. I really mean it.
Around 2 weeks after a poor debate performance sparked calls for him to step aside as the Democratic presidential candidate, Biden is on a mission to prove he's still got what it takes. But doubts about his mental and physical health persist, and recent headlines haven't helped. Reports in the New York Post and the New York Times show that a specialist on Parkinson's disease, a neurological disorder, visited the White House 8 times in 8 months. When asked to clarify, spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre got into a heated exchange with journalists.
But the president, I can tell you, has seen a neurologist 3 times, as it's connected to a physical that he gets every year that we provide to all of you.
That's a very basic, direct question.
Wait. Hold on. Wait.
8 times, or at least once, in regards to the president specifically.
Hold on a second.
That's what you should be able to answer by this point.
Wait, no. No, wait a minute. Ed, please. A little respect here, please. Well, I can tell you this, just going back to Parkinson's for a little bit, so to give you some answers here. Has the president been treated for Parkinson's? No. Is he being treated for Parkinson's? No, he's not. Is he taking medication for Parkinson's? No. So those are the things that I can give you full-blown answers on, but I'm not going to confirm a specialist, any specialist that comes to the White House out of privacy.
In a statement, the White House physician said the president has not seen a neurologist outside of his annual physical review, and Joe Biden has shown no symptoms of Parkinson's disease. But for many, a diagnosis is not necessary. According to reports, half a dozen top Democrats in the House of Representatives said in a private phone call on Sunday that Biden should drop out and let another candidate face down Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump in November's election. On Monday, Biden said that's not happening. He wrote a letter to congressional Democrats claiming he's the man to beat Donald Trump. As Biden's support fragments, his confidence, it seems, is still very much intact.
And I'm joined now by German-American political scientist Catherine Kluwer-Ashbrook, who's the executive vice president of the Bertelsmann Foundation, joins me from here in Berlin. Good to see you, Catherine. So we heard there, Biden says he is the man to beat Donald Trump. Do you think Biden is still the Democrats' best chance of victory in November's election?
Well, it matters little what this voter thinks about President Biden's chances of beating Donald Trump. What matters is whether the Democratic National Committee, the party, ultimately has a procedure in place and has a strategy in place moving into the hot phase of this election. The pundits and, of course, the polls will have you know that he is not the right man to continue in this role. And the tricky thing about the polls, which you can discount a lot of times in the American context, is that if you take polling over the years now, you do see that a moment of trailing at this moment in a campaign spells bad news for whoever is the candidate trailing. And that is clearly the case for Joe Biden now, not just this moment in time, but over time. So the Democratic Party needs to think about its party discipline, because as we heard just now in your piece, party political heads are still peeling off and speaking out against the president, while the president is trying to shore up his own flank. And that seems to signal weakness within the Democratic Party infrastructure. And I don't think that fundamentally helps the Democrats now as they head into the weeks ahead of what might likely be a very difficult convention for the Democratic Party.
We saw the very heated debate there in our report. Do you think people had doubts before the debate and are now daring to voice them?
I do think that there's probably been doubts aplenty because of the physical appearance that we have seen on the trip that the president took to Europe and in a couple of weeks before. You know, much in Biden's case is often linked to his sort of general weaknesses on the speech front. He has a stutter. He has some other issues that he's contended with throughout his political career. But there seems to be a new gravity to the president's presumptive health issues that are bringing out these critics. But what it indicates, and what I think it would indicate to voters who are undecided, is that you have now mayhem on both sides. You have a man in Donald Trump who's trying to subvert American democracy, and you have on the other side a Democratic Party that can't seem to really truly get behind the candidate who has won all of his primaries and who has committed delegates to a convention process. And that's what Joe Biden did in his letter to Congress. He said, are we the Democratic Party that sticks to our own rules, or are we a Democratic Party that's going to subvert the fundamental tenets of our own version of democracy? So who are we? And voters are seeing this, and they're disenchanted with the chaos on both sides.
What about international repercussions from all of this? The German Chancellor publicly supporting Joe Biden. But, I mean, will the doubts around the president affect the NATO summit, for example, that's happening right now?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So clearly all the international leaders will be looking very closely at, quote unquote, the presumptive leader of the free world, which is always the role that the American president embodies. But there are a couple of structural issues that are going on and that have been going on with totally condoned entirely by the American leadership. Is the idea that the Ramstein format that was there to coordinate aid to Ukraine is going to be put into a more significant, fundamental sort of NATO format that will be more structural. That serves two purposes. A, to insulate that kind of help and support, coordinated support within the North Atlantic Treaty Organization from changes that Donald Trump might carry into the organization should he become the incumbent in the White House, or from any changes that we might see out of President Biden. So inasmuch as allies will largely stick to the candidate as long as he is the candidate, we will be seeing some structural changes made to the way that the United States and Europe function together in NATO in response to, of course, the greatest challenge they now face jointly, which is the war in Ukraine.
Catherine Kluwer-Ashbrook from the Bertelsmann Foundation. Thanks so much for your analysis, Catherine. Always great to hear from you.
My pleasure.